All right, welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Today, we're going to take a look at standard rendering. Basically, with the physical sun and sky system, you're going to have a original starting default render that just looks, well, it sucks. All right, there's no other way to put it. You're going to notice a lot of grain in your shadows and stuff, and kind of like blocky shadows and whatever. But what you're seeing here is the physical sun and sky system, sort of like just a default with a simple plane attached and a cube, and that's about it. But you'll notice that after making a couple of adjustments with some render settings, we can get something that looks like this. Okay, so that's way better than what your default is. Now, part of this tutorial is inspired by a Mel Script, and that Mel Script is basically over on Lester Banks. If you go over, he featured a tutorial of mine called the Mif Exposure Photographic Tone Map tutorial, and I basically go over the controls of this, photographic tone map script. It's basically called the Create Mental Ray Indirect Lighting tab, Mel. And you can pick up a version for 2008 or 2009 and above, whatever. But essentially this script is really great because it gives us some extra controls with rendering, and that's really important to kind of getting a good look for your overall starting point for a scene. So if you're a render veteran and know a lot about shadows and lights and all that, then you can go away now, stop watching this. But what we're going to do is quickly fine-tune just a simple object in a plane on the shadow level first before we go into anything else. And it's really sort of important to know how to control your shadows first to get rid of like grain in the overall shadow and things like that. So anyway, it's real simple. Once you download the script from that DJX blog, you'll want to come in, and if you're on a Mac, just look for your users folder. And it's usually under shared. Maya and Autodesk create a Maya folder that has some other folders within it. And in this case, I want to choose the 2011 folder because I have 2011, and I want to put it in the scripts folder. And I have a couple of other little scripts loaded here, but essentially that's where you want to put things because that's the best place to put them. You don't necessarily want to put them in this folder. You'll notice that there is another scripts folder. And I would believe, I'm not all that good with Mel and scripting, but a lot of the scripts are sort of default to Maya. So put them in this one, over in your 2011 scripts. There you go. And relaunch Maya, and you'll have that script will load up, and you'll be good to go. And you'll see what that does a little bit later. But anyway, if you're on a Windows, go to your libraries, Documents, Maya, 2011 scripts, same sort of thing. And just put it inside of there. And in here you can see where I've got Create Mental Ray Indirect Lighting tab. And that's the script, okay? So once you do that, everything's good to go. And what you want to do is we're going to start out sort of, let's start out with Maya right here. As you can see here, I just have a simple cube and a plane. Nothing all that complicated. I'll show you kind of where I started out. This was the default render of just creating, a light and a cube. Actually, I have two lights in this scene, which we'll examine in a minute. But you'll notice that it's just a cube sitting there. And here it is close up. I've enabled some shadows, and these are sort of my starting point for my shadows. And those look really grainy and ugly. Okay, so let's get rid of that. I added a spotlight, and that created a secondary shadow. And as I progressed along, I eliminated that secondary shadow. I think that it was being cast by the point light, and sort of came up with, some settings that look like this. I can still see grain in the shadow, but, as I progress and switch between, say, a depth map shadow, which is going to give you a much harsher look, and going back to, messing with the filter radius and the radius of the light filter. Anyway, here's where I'm at now, okay? And this is a harsh shadow that we're going to learn how to control. And then here's a couple variations thereof. I've got a little bit softer shadow and a lot softer shadow. All right, so that's what we're going to take a look at, and we might as well get down to it because this could go on forever because rendering is such a complex subject. But we're going to take it from the start and go from ground zero basically. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to File, and I think I'll just do a new scene, and I don't need to save that. And real quick, we'll just create a polygon, just like a plane or something like that. Just, get yourself a ground plane there. Maybe take it up in size. I'll just give mine quite a bit of size here. Maybe go into shaded mode there. And let's take a look at it from there. And I'll just go ahead and create a cube, just a basic cube. And let's see if I can just do a little cube right there. Well, there it is. And I'll bring it down in size a little bit. And I may want to just center it out just so I can, kind of not deal with too many issues with, I want to know where my shadows are. And I'm going to bring it up off the surface a bit. So there it is. There's a simple cube, and I might take that back a little bit in scale. All right. So now we have that. And I think in terms of like looking at a beginning render, I'm going to go to my wireframe mode there, and I'm going to create a couple of lights. I think I'll first just do a standard point light. That's going to come in right here on the grid origin, and I'm just going to hit W on the keyboard and bring it up. And in this case, I think I might want to turn on my lights and actually see what's happening with that light. Might want to also click on my high quality rendering, and in this case we don't have textures yet, but I'll go ahead and just turn that on. All right, so now we have a point light. Let's see what it looks like as a default render. I'm going to bring my render window over here. Let's just do a quick render. Click on there, and there it is. That's what we're seeing now. I think what I'll do is go back and get rid of all of these various renders that I have saved in here, and I'll just trash all the renders, and we'll sort of do a take-by-take render here of what's happening. And yeah, I got quite a few saved up there from just various adjustments that I was doing before. And you'll notice that you'll do probably about maybe 10 to 15, maybe even 20 different adjustments before you get a render that looks any good. It takes a while, but this is sort of the fast track. All right. So here we've got our object, and we've got our plane, and we've got no shadows going on. Let's look first at our lights. And a lot of times you'll just want to come over here into your hypershade and go in under your light section and see what you have going there. In this case, I have a point light. I'll go into the attribute editor here, and let's take a look at that. I'm going to move my render view out of the way. And our point light shape, basically you have various sample levels for fog. You have your depth map shadows. You have your basic point light attributes. I'm going to leave everything at default for the moment. All right, and you'll notice that it doesn't, depth map shadows is not checked, and nor is use Raytrace shadows. So that's cool. I'm going to move this to the side, and we'll bring our render view back, or our render window back here, and let's see what is happening at the moment. If I enable the depth map shadows on this, there's two different options to start with shadows. There's depth map shadows, and I'm going to go ahead and save this render, and I'm going to do a quick render there. As you can see, our depth map shadows are sort of producing, our shadow from our object, which is cool. But let's zoom in a little bit here, and I'm going to bring this down and maybe up just a little bit. Let's take another render. I'm going to go ahead and save this one. Go ahead and do another render, and you can see where these shadows look really sloppy. All right, and that's depth map shadows. We could do one of two things. We could up the resolution a little bit, but right now let's just leave it at 512 to minimize our render times, because this is the key to everything right here, is your render time and these numbers. I'm going to maybe set this filter size up from 1 to, let's say, 2, and I'll just leave everything kind of there, and we'll see what happens on a cross comparison. All right, I'm going to save that one. So by bringing up just a tiny bit in the filter size, you can see where your shadows got a little cleaner. They went from there to there. All right. And notice also that I'm on mental ray rendering right now. And I'm going to bring up my render window, my render settings window. And I'll show you that I'm just in quality setting as a draft, just a default quality draft. And we don't want to mess around with these yet. We're going to fine tune these later, and we're going to look at mental ray later, but just, you know, go with the standard mental ray default draft quality to start with. And there you go. So here's where we're at with our shadows. Well, I could bring this filter size up to say maybe like 4. All right, I'll try and bring that up to 4. I'll save one of those, that render image, and now we can see what it looks like at 4. I'm going to save that as well. And let's just take a look at where we started. No shadow. We added our shadow. There it is in close-up, and there it is when we start messing with our filter size. So depth map shadows can, you know, sort of, you know, save you time. We didn't really sacrifice anything on our render time down here. But let's say we don't want to use depth map shadows. Let's say we go to something more like our Raytrace shadows. We could click Raytrace shadows, and that disables your depth map. And let's go down here to the light radius. Let's just see what it looks like as a standard render right now with Raytrace shadows. I'm going to go ahead and save that image, and I'll do another one. And there it is with our starting point for our Raytrace shadows. Now, the first thing I want to look at is that's a pretty hard edge right there. And, you know, technically, we could put another light in this scene, and you know, maybe we should at this point is sort of just look at another light. Let's create a spotlight, and this will show you the difference. I'm going to create a spotlight there, and I think what I'll do is just come over and we'll rotate that to like a -90, and that'll just make it point straight down. And let's go over and just move that light up a little bit. And there we go. Let's bring it over here, and maybe, you know, in this case I might want to go to my panels and look through selected, and that basically lets me look through this spotlight. All right, and I'll sort of just move it around here. Might want to sort of have it come down like that. I'm going to have it cast a shadow, so we'll just leave it there. I'm going to come back to my panels, go to perspective, come back into my perspective view, and I think I'll just go into home there. So let's do a quick render on what we have going here and see what happens. I'm going to hit my save that image, and here's where we're at now. You can see where there's a whole different shadow thing going on with that spotlight because, you know, by default, let's look at our spotlight. I'm going to bring the hypershade over and take a look at that. I'm going to click on my spotlight right here. It's in the lighting tab of your hypershade, and we'll go to the spotlight shape, and I'm going to go back into my tabs here. And as you'll notice, we have a couple of different things. The default for the spotlight's all right here. We haven't changed anything, and you'll notice it does have depth map shadows enabled. And that's why we have that shadow right there. So I'm going to move my hypershade out of the way. Let's take a look at this a little closer. With this depth map shadows, depends on which light you want to use for your shadows. I think I want to use my spotlight for the shadows because I like this long shadow. So I'll leave that there. I'll go ahead and come back into my hypershade and just choose that point light. And I'm going to disable those Raytrace shadows. All right, no big deal. So now let's take another render. I'm going to save that one. We'll take a render and see where we're at. Well, right away you see where that shadow disappeared from the point light, and now we just have this shadow that's being cast by the spotlight, which is cool. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and choose my spotlight. So I'm going to click in my hypershade right there and make sure my spotlight is here, my spotlight 1, and I'm going to disable depth map shadows for a minute. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to enable Raytrace shadows, and I'll just by default I'm going to save that image. By default, I'm going to do a quick render, and you can see where, yeah, it's not that good. It's a harsh shadow, but let's say I want something a little softer. Well, the first thing you need to look at is the light radius. You know, maybe bring your light radius up a little bit. I'll save that render, and we'll do a little light radius. You can see around the edges where you're getting a little bit more, you know, it has a little bit of grain to it, but we're going to fix that. Let's say the shadow rays are set at 1. Let's bring those all the way up to like 40. All right, and do a quick render. I'm going to save that and do a quick render. Well, by bringing that shadow level up, it sort of softened the edges, but it didn't really do much, you know, for our overall gradation in the shadows. So right now I might want to look at my light radius, and in this case I'll bring it up to, say, 1. I'm going to go ahead and save that one and see what that radius did. Well, it did a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and save that image and take this up to, say, maybe like 10. And let's see what happens there. All right. Well, at 10, it totally blew the shadow out all over the place. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back down to 5, and we'll take a look at what's happening with 5. All right, that tightens it up a little bit. I'm going to save it, and I might go to, like, say, 2.5 and do a test at that point. I'm going to save. Yeah, I think I already saved that one, so we'll do another save. All right. Well, there it is. We're starting to see how this light radius basically has an effect. I'm going to do a save on there. It has an effect on the overall look. So by varying that light radius from a super wide down to a little bit smaller, we're getting a little bit better, you know, a little bit better shadow right there. Okay, well, now the second step, time to kick into production quality for a moment. And let's take a look at our render settings. Now, if you open up your render settings window, just hit this little icon right here, get your render settings, and look in your quality. Right now it's at draft. I'm going to switch it up to production. All right. And now that I have production, I think I saved that, but let's do a quick default render at production value. Great. There's the shadow. It looks way better than what we had before. Okay. And there it is. And here is the difference between the last render and production. And I don't know if you can see this on YouTube very well, but look in this shadow area right here, and I'm going to move this back and forth. There's what we have now with production quality on Mental Ray, and there's what it was before. So right there, we just increased our shadow. And, you know, we're only at 2 seconds on our render time, so that's cool for the moment, I guess. We haven't started adding in textures or anything, but, you know, this is just sort of a simple way of starting out. All right, well, there we go there. Let's take a look at what you might be able to do also. I'm going to keep that over here for a second. You can switch this over on your filtering over here to something, say, more like Mitchell or something like that. You'll notice that the filter size sort of increased by 1. I'm going to go ahead and hit save on there. And we'll do another render and see if that really added anything. We're at 3 seconds on our render time, and let's compare it against our last render. All right, I'm not seeing much of a difference. There it is on our you know, newly created Mitchell filter, and there it is without. So not a lot of difference. I'm sort of moving back and forth between those two, and I'm not seeing much change, so that's cool. All right, well, that's one thing that you can do to start upping your quality. Now, you can also up your max sample level on your ray tracing. And if we do that, I'm going to go to, say, like 4 on my sampling level right here. And I'll save that image, and we'll do this. We'll take a quick render. And because I upped that max sample level, it's going to take a lot longer to render. And you notice that we only upped it by, what, 100%. Like, we went from 2 to 4. So it's really taking a lot longer to render, and it may or may not be worth you know, this may or may not be worth the rendering time in order to increase the sample level over here. So something to be aware of, but it generally will give you a much better look as well by upping that sample. So I saved this image there, and I think there it was before. Real hard to see on YouTube, but here it was before, and there it is after. I notice a little bit of difference on my monitor. It looks a little cleaner with the sample level at 4, but in this case it's not worth adding like 30 seconds overall to your render time. Really isn't. I mean, 30 seconds just to get a tiny bit better on your grain, on your shadows, not worth it. So anyway, I'll reset this to 2, and there you go. There's some other settings over here that you can mess around with depending on what you want your shadow to do in here. And in this case, a lot of times it doesn't hurt to up your shadows in here in your master settings, in your render settings. I'll go ahead and do a quick render there, and see we're still at 3 seconds, and I just upped the shadow values from 2 to 4. And if I do a render there, kind of see where I stand. Yeah, so anyway, that's another place you can mess around with your shadows. So I might go to 10 and see if I can push it to 10. And I'll save that frame. So it's really a back and forth, and I'm at like 2 seconds, and shadow rays over here and ray tracing are set to 10. So I think I'll just leave it there for the moment. But you get the idea. It's a back and forth between your render settings, your lights, your shadows, your filter sizes. And there's where we started, and here's kind of where we're at now. Let's take a look really quick at that physical sun and sky while we're in here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move my render view to the side and come into my render settings, and I'm going to switch that indirect lighting over to the physical sun and sky. So I'll go ahead and create my physical sun and sky. You'll see because I installed that Mel script we talked about earlier, I have a MIA photographic node that I should be using instead of this MIA exposure simple. And this, by default, the exposure simple will be attached to your physical sun and sky. But in this case, I have this extra node, and I'll show you what that is real quick. I'm going to leave mine checked there. Go ahead and hit OK. And let's move our render settings out of the way for a minute, and maybe come down here and do a little bit different angle, and just do a quick default render. All right, I'm going to save that. Let's do a default render. Okay, so there it is, the really ugly starting physical sun and sky default render. And doesn't look like much here, but let's look at what we have to work with in order to sort of improve upon what we have going right now. In this case, I think what I'll do is I'm going to come over into the hypershade here, and I'm going to sort of get rid of, I'm going to look in the lights section over here in my lights, and I'm going to get rid of that point light and that spotlight. I'm just going to delete those. And you'll notice that down here in the work area, because we enabled the physical sun and sky, that you have your various nodes here that are attached, just sort of by default. There they are. Okay, so that kind of makes up our physical sun and sky system. If I were to come to the graph and just sort of clear it and look at my sun shape right here, you'll notice that it has a couple of different things. It basically has a tab that explains the basic starting points of where everything is at here, and it also has a shape node which gives you an intensity. For the moment, we're sort of just interested in this physical sun and sky and in this shadow softness. All right, so the first place that you're going to look when you sort of enable the physical sun and sky is you want to look at this shadow softness and your samples. I'm going to switch this softness up from like 1, and let's just do something extreme like a shadow softness of 10. All right, and I'm going to save that, and we'll do a test with it at 10. And you'll see a little bit of breakup right here. There's a lot of edge kind of artifacting, which is good. That's kind of what we want. In this case, I think I'll try 20. Okay, let's see what 20 does. I'll save that and do another render. And there it is. It's going pretty fast. I mean, we're still at 3 seconds on a render time, so that's not bad. And by upping that shadow softness, you can see where it sort of changed it a bit. It gave us a little softer shadow. We should maybe do that at like 30 or something. And I'll do another quick render. And you get the idea. This controls how soft your shadow is, which is very useful. Now, once you get it somewhere to a point that you like, you may want to say up your sample level over here to, I'll just double it. I'll go to 8. We'll save that frame, go to 8. And it's getting a little better. You may want to take that sample level to 16 and sort of just ease it up as we go along. And that's sort of the best way to test, you know, what this look is of your shadow here. I think I'll stick with that for the moment, and yeah, we'll sort of make some changes from here now. I'm going to move my render view out of the way, and I think in this case we should get our, let's take a look at where our utilities are. And if you go to your utilities section, this is where the physical sun and sky controls are. So in this case, I want this MIA exposure photographic. And that Mel Script that I was talking about, the Create Mental Ray Indirect Lighting tab, that's what this will do. It hooks up this this shader, or you know, this photographic node automatically to the camera. And so I now have these controls to work with. I'll move my hypershade out of the way here for a second. And right away, I know that there's several things going on with this render that I don't like. And I'm going to bring the render back over here. You notice how blown out it is, and it's just sort of blah. I mean, it has no color. I mean, it doesn't really have a very good look to it. I may want to adjust a couple of things. My f-stop, just like in photographics, if I lower this by a half a stop and take it to 11.5, and maybe take the saturation from where it's at now, you know, let's just sort of take it up to there somewhere. And I'm going to switch my gamma from 2.2 to 1.8. Now, this may or may not be something you need to do. You may want to leave it at 2.2. I find I get really good results when I switch my gamma right here to 1.8. And now, let's take another render on this and see what it looks like. I'm going to save that image. And here it was before, and here's where we're at now. All right? Looks a lot better. So I may want to assign a different material to this object right here. So I'll just come over and make a quick, let's make a quick Lambert for that. Maybe just give it a color. I'm going to click on there and give it a, we'll give it this kind of warm color there. And we'll do another render. Actually, I'll choose my object and assign that material, that new Lambert. And we saved that one. Do a quick render. All right, that lets us see this a little better. Now you'll notice that this background, this physical sun and sky, has a horizon line right here. Well, you can easily get to the controls over here in your utilities on your physical sun and sky by coming to this physical sun sky, or physical sky, and let's take that horizon blur to, like, say 0.300. All right, and maybe we could mess with the height. We could put this into a negative area, but for the moment, let's just see what that did. All right, by giving it a blur, it sort of gave us a little bit better depth of field effect back there, and that's cool. Okay, so there we go. We're sort of getting to it. I'm going to go ahead and bring this down a little bit to this plane. And maybe just switch up the angle a little bit and do another quick render. I want to see the top of that, so I'll save that and do that. All right, there it is. The shadow's turning out a little bit blue. This is a standard default shader. If I go in and choose this sun direction, or you'll see a sun, basically a sun shape, and that's our physical sun. That's like represents the sun. And maybe go into your rotate tool and just rotate this a bit. We'll go ahead and do another render and see what that looks like. All right. So the shadow is sort of coming out a little bit better. The light on, you can see the obvious difference by just changing that direction of the sun. We're starting to get a better look, you know, up here in the sky and on our shadow. I'm going to go ahead and tilt this a little bit more. And we'll save that frame. We'll come in here, and there it is. All right. Well, you can see where it's making a big difference on how the overall look is of this. So there might be a couple of things that I want to do at this point. Might want to come in and take a look at that Mif Exposure simple node. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and now I have my exposure photographic controls here. And let's come down and go into the burn highlights and bring that up just a little bit. Maybe bring the crushed blacks up a little bit, and I'll leave the saturation alone there. And I'll also make one other adjustment. I'll come back over into the hypershade and pick this physical sun sky and shift this red blue shift to say something more like 0.100. So I'll give that a 0.100 right there. And let's see what it looks like now. It should look a lot better. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm going to save that. So here's where we were at before, right there. And here's where we're at now, right? By just doing those simple adjustments, we have a way better look for the physical sun and sky. All right. And there's more places to go here to make adjustments. So let's do that real quickly and sum this tutorial up. I'm going to come over into the render settings right here. And in your qualities, actually in your features section, you'll notice final gathering is usually enabled when you do production quality. But if we also switch on global illumination and do a quick render, I'm going to save that one. It's going to look a little different, and I'll go ahead and save that as well. By turning on global illumination, we're sort of using the sun to you know, give us, add extra properties to the overall render. But in this case, since I don't have much going on here, it's not, you can't really see the difference yet. We're not really sort of, yeah, we're not, I can see a little bit of difference on my monitor in the overall look of what's happening here in the shadow, but for the most part, you know, that's going to be used sort of in a more complex way later on. All right, so anyway, that gets you up and running with looking at lights, your shadows, adjusting some of these parameters here to get, you know, a better definition in the shadow, and sort of fine-tuning everything along the way. So here's where we started, right back here, and here's kind of where we ended up, right there. All right, so I know this tutorial has been long and arduous, but I commend you for watching and sort of learning a little bit about this. And yeah, play around with it. It takes a long time. That's just fine-tuning shadows. This has nothing to do with anything else really. So great. I hope you learned something, and you know, read the owner's manual. No more books. Read the Autodesk owner's manuals, because they're really good. They have answers. All right. And as always, be a good person, because I know you are, and have fun in life. And there you go. So thanks for watching.